Hello students, in previous two videos we have covered the uh, first part of the third module. In this video we are going to start with the second part of the third module. You can see this is the index part what we are going to cover here, and in this video we are going to cover the memory section, sensors, actuators and LED and 7 segment LED display. Okay, now we'll start with the memory part. You can see here, if you consider any of the embedded system, the memory part becomes the very important along with the processor and controller. The main part after the processor or controller, what it is taking is the memory. So, and this memory can be either any one of these two types. Either it can be a on-chip memory or off-chip memory. So, what do you mean by on-chip and off-chip memory? So, the processor or the controller contain a built-in memory, or if the memory is inside the chip, then we call that as a on-chip memory. And if the processor or the controllers do not contain any memory inside the chip, that is it require an external memory to connect with the processor or controller. Some processors are built in with the internal memory, that we call it as a on-chip memory, and some processors or controllers are not built in with the memory. For that we need to add the off-chip memory externally to that device or to the embedded systems. So those memories are, we call it as a off-chip memory. And again these memory are the memory which we are categorizing here, on-chip memory and off-chip memory. They are further divided into the following types in embedded system applications. Either it may be a ROM or it may be a RAM type. So the memory can be categorized into two types, either it may be on-chip memory and off-chip memory. And further there are different types of memory used in the embedded system applications, and that can be either this ROM, read-only memory, or it may be either RAM, that is random access memory, or what we call it as a read-write memory also. Now we will see some different examples or different ROM types and RAM types in the upcoming slides. See here, first we will start with the ROM memory, that is read-only memory, or we call it as a one-time programmable memory also. So here the program or this memory is mainly used to store the program part. This memory is mainly used to store the program part, hence we call it as a program memory also. Okay, and it stores the program instructions. You can see here, it stores the program instructions or code storage, and it can be classified into following types as shown in the figure below. You can see here, this ROM can be, or code memory can be, a flash type memory, or it may be a OTP, or they call it as a PROM or programmable ROM. They call it as a masked ROM or MROM. They call it as a EEPROM, that is electrically programmable ROM, and EEPROM, that is this one is erasable programmable ROM, EEPROM means, and EEPROM means electrically erasable programmable ROM, and NV is non-volatile RAM it is. Okay, so this ROM can be further categorized into 6 types of memory. Now we'll see one by one which are those memory types. First one is masked ROM or MROM. So here masked RAM or masked ROM is one-time programmable, that you should remember. Okay, one-time programmable means once if you burn any data, if you burn any instructions, or if you program once on this ROM, you cannot change that. That's why we call it as a one-time programmable. And this device is factory programmed or by the manufacturer only by hardware technology. So this can be, you can see here in the second point, this is factory programmed, means the ROM here is programmed during the manufacturing only. That's why we call it as a factory programmed, or it is programmed by the manufacturer only by hardware technology. So for the programming of this ROM, they use a technology called hardware technology. So that is very important, and you cannot reprogram this MROM, that you should remember. Third point you can see here, you cannot reprogram, they cannot be reprogrammed. These MROMs cannot be reprogrammed. So this is about the MROM. Now second one is programmable ROM or OTP. They call it as a OTP also, one-time programmable. So PROMs are also one-time programmable memories only. Along with the MROMs, the PROMs also one-time programmable memories only. Unlike MROMs, PROMs are not programmed by the manufacturer. So the MROMs are programmed by the manufacturer by hardware technology, but here they are not programmed by the manufacturer and cannot be reprogrammed. Here also they cannot be reprogrammed, but the only difference is they are not programmed by the manufacturer here. In MROMs they are using hardware technology for programming by the manufacturer only, but here they are not programmed by the manufacturer. That is the difference. And since they provide low cost solution, they are widely used in commercial productions of the embedded systems. Since they are low cost compared to other ROMs, that's why they are used in commercial productions in the embedded system market. So this is about the programmable ROM. Now we'll see the erasable programmable ROM, that is EEPROM. During the development phase, code is subject to continuous change and it is not economical to use them in development phase. So if you take any embedded systems or during the development, the programmer may be going to many changes, and what is the disadvantage with PROM and MROM is that if the programmer is going through many changes, you once, and if he has used this PROM or MROM, so in that case, if he has burned the program once in those PROM and MROM, you cannot reuse that once if you change the program. So in those cases, this MROM and PROMs become inefficient. So in those cases, whenever the programmer is going to continuous changes with his programs during the development phase, so in those cases the programmers use this erasable programmable ROM alternative to this PROM and MROM. So this is very economical compared to the PROM and MROM. If you change continuously PROM and MROMs, that is not an economical. So to make your embedded device economical, we are using this erasable programmable ROM, and this problem can be overcome by EEPROMs. That's why we have said the problem which you are facing from PROM and MROM, because of that one-time programmable memories, we cannot reuse them here. We cannot reuse them here. We cannot reuse them. So to overcome this issue, we are using this erasable programmable ROMs, and it has a flexibility to provide reprogram on the same chip. So you can have multiple times you can reprogram it. Okay, and here program can be erased by exposing memory to UV rays, that is ultraviolet rays. How we are reprogramming this EEPROM? So that is by the method of exposing that memory to the ultraviolet rays. So this is how we are reprogramming the erasable programmable ROM. Now the fourth one is electrically erasable programmable ROM. So this is the extended version of this EEPROM is extended version of this EEPROM is extended version of EEPROM only. But the only difference here is, here we use in EEPROM we use UV rays for programming the ROM, but here we are using electrical signals to program the read-only memory. So that is the basic difference between EEPROM and EEPROM. In EEPROM we use UV rays to program the ROM, but here in EEPROM we are using electrical signals to program those. That's why we have mentioned here, as the name suggests, the information contained in the EEPROM can be reprogrammed by electrical signals, and you can reprogram it many times. And these chips include chip erase mode here, and one of the additional facility which are provided to the EEPROM is that they are chip erase mode, and in this mode they can be erased in few milliseconds. So that is the beauty of EEPROM. So you can see the evolution from MROM to PROM. They are just one-time programmable. They are once the programmer programs that, you cannot reuse that. Once that's how the evolution started. Now the programmers are coming with more adaptability or to changes what the customer is expecting. So in those cases they are going for the EEPROM, and so EEPROM is we are using UV rays for the programming, but along with that the extended version of EEPROM is EEPROM. Here they are using electrical signals to program the memory, that is read-only memory, and it is embedded with chip erase mode, which can provide the programmer to use this EEPROM to erase in few milliseconds only. So this is the beauty of EEPROM. Now we will see what do you mean by flash ROM. So it is the latest and most popular technology used in today's embedded systems. Maybe you have heard the flash ROM. So it combines the reprogrammability of EEPROM and high capacity of standard ROMs. So we can say this flash ROM as a combination of EEPROM, that is combination of EEPROM plus the high capacity of standard ROMs. What do you mean by standard ROMs? The standard ROMs are PROMs only. PROMs or one-time programmable ROMs. So what is that? The most popular technology used in today's embedded systems, flash ROMs are used, and it combines reprogrammability of EEPROM and high capacity of standard ROM. Along with that, flash memory is organized as sectors, or they call it as blocks or pages. they organized it as a sectors or pages. So whatever the data, whatever the programs you are storing, that can be stored in sectors or in terms of pages. That you should remember. And the last one among the ROMs is NVRAM, that is non-volatile RAM. NVRAM. Don't confuse with the NVROM. There is no such ROM available. NVROM. This is NVRAM, and you may be getting confused why I am using RAM in the ROM. Actually, they have used this NVRAM in both ROM as well as RAM. We can see here we have used this NVRAM here also. In the RAM also we have used NVRAM, and in ROM also we have this NVRAM. So this NVRAM, that is non-volatile RAM, can be used as both RAM as well as ROM. That's why we are using it in both cases. So what is this NVRAM? This is non-volatile random access memory, that you know, and with battery backup. So that is the main thing. Actually this RAM, NVRAM, is nothing but a RAM. It is nothing but a RAM with battery backup facility. With a battery backup facility. So you know the working of RAM. So RAM, and we know that RAM is a volatile memory, right? RAM is a volatile memory. So what do you mean by volatile memory? So if you whenever there is no power supply, whatever the data available, so that will be lost. That will not be stored in volatile memory. And this RAM is a volatile memory, we know that. And what is this NVRAM is? So we are providing a battery backup with this RAM here. So what do you mean by that? So whenever there is a power loss or power cut, so it will the data which is available, so that will not be lost immediately. So that RAM is, since it is provided with the battery backup, the data which is there, that will not be lost in that case, because of the battery backup provided by the NVRAM. And in the absence of external power supply, you can see here they provide battery backup for the RAM. So that is why we are using NVRAM here. And here the memory and minute battery are packed together in a single package, that you should know. There is no separate unit available for the battery here. Both NVRAM, that is both the memory, you can see here, both memory and battery, that is minute battery, are embedded in a single package. That's why many of the programmers are using NVRAM, and that you can be used it as a both RAM as well as ROM. Fine. Now we'll see what do you mean by read write memory, or what they call it generally a RAM, or random access memory. So you know that what do you mean by RAM is a data memory or working memory of the processor or controller. So that you should remember. Your ROM is a program memory, okay, but your RAM is a data memory, or they call it as a working memory of the processor or controller. And you should know that this is a volatile memory that I have mentioned here in NVRAM. And you can see here the processor or controller can read data from the memory or write to the memory. So what you can do here, you can do both read as well as write operation. So read means if the data is there in the memory, you can read that or you can get that information, and if you want to copy some data to the memory, that we call it as a write operation. So here this RAM memory, it is providing you both read as well as write operation, but in case of ROM it is providing only read. Once if you program that memory, you can only read there, but you can do both read as well as write operation on this RAM. Okay, and you can see the classification of RAM here. They are classified that to 3 types once again: SRAM, DRAM and NVRAM. So what you know that what you mean by SRAM, that is static RAM, dynamic RAM, and once again we are using a term NVRAM here, that is non-volatile RAM here. Now we'll see what do you mean by static RAM. So here you have heard the terms flip-flops. So what are those? Those are the bistable elements, so that each flip-flop can store a 1 bit of data. And what this SRAM is? This SRAM is made up of flip-flops only. And what they are doing? They store data in the form of voltage. That you should remember here. So in SRAM, the data is stored in the form of voltage, and it is the fastest among all the RAMs available. So these are the two main points you should remember about SRAM, that is they are made up of flip-flops, that is first point, and the data is stored in the form of voltage, that is second point, and this is the fastest among all the RAMs available. So that is the third point. And one more important point is it takes 6 MOSFETs to build SRAM which holds 1 bit of information. So how this flip-flop is built? That flip-flop I have told already that one flip-flop can hold a data of 1 bit, and to store that 1 bit of data, we need 6 MOSFETs. That is very important. To hold this 1 bit of data, we need 6 MOSFETs. So that is the structure of that flip-flop consists of this 6 MOSFETs, and that's why what I mentioned here. It takes around 6 MOSFETs to build SRAM which holds 1 bit of information. And they have further mentioned how they have used the MOSFETs here. You can see 4 MOSFETs to build flip-flop element, means to store the data they need 4 MOSFETs. How many what is the amount of data they are storing here? They are storing 1 bit of information here, that you should remember. They need 6 MOSFETs to store 1 bit of data, and in those 6 MOSFETs they are using 4 MOSFETs for storing and 2 MOSFETs for controlling purpose. That you should remember. 4 in 6 they are using 4 for the storage, and that is flip-flop element, and 2 for the control part. And major limitation is less capacity and high cost. That's why many of the programmers are not preferred this SRAM over DRAM. That's why many of the programmers are preferring DRAM over SRAM, because it is high cost and less capacity. Okay, you can see here why less capacity means it is taking around 6 MOSFETs to store only 1 bit of information. That's why we can see it as a less capacity. And since we are using more transistors here, MOSFETs means MOS field effect transistors. So since because of the less capacity, the cost is also more. That's why many of the programmers are preferring DRAM over SRAM. And you can see here in DRAM, the first important point is they store data in the form of charge, that is Q. So this is how they are storing the data here in DRAM. Here they are storing the data in the form of voltage. Here they are storing the data in the form of charge. And they are made up of MOSFET and the capacitor. So this is important here. Capacitor part. SRAMs are made up of only MOSFETs only. But here along with the MOSFETs, they have a capacitor also element, electronic element, that is a capacitor also, and it is high capacity, that is density is more here compared to the SRAM. You can see here it is a less capacity, it is a high capacity or high density and low cost compared to SRAM. Since because of the high capacity, the cost of the DRAM is less compared to SRAM. And since the information is stored in the form of charge, it needs a refreshing circuit. I have mentioned this while explaining in module 1, that is hardware. In the hardware part of the embedded system, I have mentioned while explaining the memory part. Maybe I have mentioned this one also, refreshing circuit. So because of the capacitor, and that is data is stored in the form of charge, we need a refreshing circuit, and this refreshing circuit makes it complex. What makes it complex? The refreshing circuit makes this DRAM complex. That's why DRAM is slower compared to SRAM. Maybe it is having higher capacity and low cost, but because of the refreshing circuit, the SRAMs are faster than DRAM. That you should remember. Okay. And once again, the NV part, that is non-volatile memory part. Again, non-volatile memory means non-volatile random access memory. It is provided with the battery backup, as I mentioned in the ROM case. And in the absence of external power supply, the battery is provided here, that is on chip battery, what I have mentioned here. In the memory, minute battery is packaged together in a single package, and many of the programmers are, that's why, preferred this NVRAM over ROMs. And this is the best example. One of the most used NVRAM by the embedded manufacturers is DS1744. So that is the series number, the example of 32 KB NVRAM. So that NVRAM has a capacity of 32 KB, and this is the one of the most used NVRAMs in the embedded systems, that is DS1744. Okay. So in previous case we have seen the memory types, that is ROM and RAM. Many types of ROM and RAM we have seen. Now we'll start the sensors and actuators. So why we need sensors and actuators? To make interaction with the real world or the environment or the surrounding. So that is, if you take any embedded systems or real-time embedded systems that need to communicate or make interaction with the real world continuously. So to make that interaction, we need some components which acts as an intermediate between the environment and the embedded systems. So that part can be explained with the help of sensors and actuators. So you can see here embedded system has to be in constant interaction with the real world for better controlling purpose or monitoring functions, and to make any changes according to the input changes with the real world. Actually, in the first point we are mentioning, they are mentioning here why we need sensors and actuators. Why we need sensors and actuators in embedded systems, because for the constant interaction with the real world, for which purpose they are making an interaction here, for controlling and monitoring functions, to make changes according to the input changes with the real world. We are using these sensors and actuators, and you can see here these changes in the system environment or variable are detected by the sensors connected to the input port of the embedded system. You should note one point here, we are using the sensors in the input port of the embedded systems, and we are using actuators in the output port of the embedded systems. So if the embedded system wants to take some inputs from the environment or from the surrounding, so in that case it uses sensors for that purpose, to take the inputs from the environment or from the surrounding. And if the embedded system wants to give some inputs, so in that case it is using actuators which are connected to the output port of the embedded system. You can see one more time here, the changes in the system environment or variable are detected by sensors connected to the input port of the embedded systems. So those changes in the environments can be detected by the sensors, and there are n number of sensors available in the market. There are many types. There are temperature sensors, there are pressure sensors, and there are many other piezoelectric pressure sensors are there. So there are n number of sensors are available, and those sensors are used by the programmer or by the developer according to his requirement. Okay. Similarly, the actuators are connected to the output port of the embedded systems. The sensors are connected to the input port of the embedded system, whereas the actuators are connected to the output port of the embedded system to make an interaction with the outside world. So these 2 points you should remember here. Okay. Now we will see what do you mean by sensors here. Sensors are nothing but it is a transducer device. You may be heard this term in your first year mechanical subject in engineering mechanics. Maybe you heard this term transducer. So why this transducer we need? So which converts one form of energy to another form. So it takes the input from one of the from the environment, and it's in the form of in one form of energy, and it converts that energy into another form which is understandable by the embedded systems. So depending on the type of sensor, they are taking input in one form and the providing information to the embedded system in the other form. So okay. So if you take temperature sensors, so it will sense the temperature from the surrounding or the environment, and it will provide the information to the embedded systems in the form of electric signals or in the form of voltage. So that's how the sensor is making, and that's how the sensor is working. So sensor here, the temperature sensor, it is taking information in the form of temperature. If there is a increase in temperature or decrease in temperature, that sensor is sensing that, and it is providing the equivalent voltage to the embedded systems. So that's how sensors are working. So that's why we are telling here it is a transducer device. So what's transducer does? It converts one form of energy to another form for any measurement or control purpose. And sensors are used in input port of the embedded systems that I have told to get inputs to the embedded system from the real world. So if you take any embedded system or real-time embedded systems that needs some input from the environment or that works on the input provided by the environment, so to get that input you need sensors here, and that is this sensor is used in input port of the embedded system to make an interaction with the real world. That you should remember here. So this is how we are using sensors in the embedded systems. And about the actuators, it is once again it is a transducer device which converts signals to corresponding physical action. Is once again this one. It is you can take it as a reverse operation of sensors. So temperature, if you consider temperature sensor only here in the first case, so the temperature sensor is sensing any temperature change in the environment and providing electrical or voltage signals to the embedded system. And if you consider the actuator, once again we can take the same here. So in the output port here what we have is the actuator device. So the same if there are any temperature changes in the environment, that is sensed by the sensor, and the sensor provided some electrical signal or voltage signal, and that you should display it on the display board or a LED display. So to make contact with this LED display with the temperature change in the embedded systems, we need actuators here. So here the sensors are used in the input port to make the temperature changes, and the actuators are needed in the output port to display that on the LED display. That temperature, if there are any temperature changes in the environment, sensor changes that, it will generate the electronic or voltage signals, and that voltage signals are given to the actuators, or that are generated by the actuators, and that are now given to the LED display, so that you can see any temperature change in the environment on that LED display. And they are used in output port of the embedded systems. And you can see here they have taken the example of ECG machine in the hospitals. Many of them you have seen the ECG machine, so which captures the heartbeat status with the help of electrocodes. So you can see the heartbeats on the monitor, and along with that it is to collect that heartbeat data. So they have put some electrodes on the chest part of the person. So they will collect the electrodes which are connected there. They will collect the data, that is heartbeat, and they will monitor, and those electrodes take the information, and they will provide the same information or display the same data on the LED display, or there will be a print also on the paper. So that's how you can see here the electrodes form the sensors and records it on the monitor, so with the help of actuators. So to sense that heartbeat of a person, we need electrodes that we have connected to the that we have attached it to the person, and to record the same heartbeat on the LED display, or to print that on the paper, we need actuators here. So this is how we are using sensors and actuators in any embedded systems. So this is one example. And one more point here is the IO subsystem. So what it is providing is, it is facilitating the interaction of the embedded system with the real world. So I/O means input output subsystem. It is some of the embedded systems are provided with sensors and actuators, and some complex embedded systems are provided with some I/O subsystems. So the main function of that I/O subsystem is to make an interaction with the real world, and here the interaction happens through the sensors and actuators only, connected to input and output ports respectively of the embedded system. That we should know how we are interacting with the sensors and actuators with the help of input and output ports. And these sensors and actuators cannot be interfaced directly with the embedded systems. So they need a I/O subsystems like ADC, DAC and optocouplers. So what they have mentioned here is, we are using sensors and actuators in the input and output port of the embedded system, but you cannot interface these sensors and actuators directly with the embedded system. So to make an better communication between these sensors and actuators, we need subsystems, and they may be of ADC, that is analog to digital converter. There may be a DAC, digital to analog converters, and optocouplers. So these are the some I/O subsystem types: ADC, DAC, optocouplers. So to make better communication with the sensors and actuators and embedded systems, we need some intermediates there in between sensors, actuators and embedded systems. We need some intermediator. So that intermediate is nothing but a I/O subsystem here, and that can be of any one of the following here. It may be ADC, DAC or optocouplers. Okay.